Hi everyone, it's Jan, and for those of you that are my regular YouTube subscribers, this is going to be a little bit different video, but I want to encourage you to stick around because there's going to be lots of tips and tricks. I'm going to be showing you how to use watercolors and colored pencils and pan pastels all together to create a really fun journaling page. But I have a new group of folks that I've started having some fun with, and we are all part of this journaling Bible community over on Facebook. And we take a journaling Bible and we actually draw and paint and write in it according to the things that we are learning while we do our Bible studies or devotional kinds of times. And so this particular video that I'm going to share with you is to kind of walk you through step by step on how I created this page. Actually, there's two pages, one in the Old Testament and one in the New, and kind of the whole thing that ties them together is what this journaling page is about. I'm using this Advent devotional from the Village Church in Dallas, Texas. My sister goes there, and we're in the middle of Advent season, and so my quiet time has been really focused around that. And I am going to introduce you to some of the things that I do when I am journaling, doing art journaling in my Bible. You saw that I use a kneaded eraser, I use a number 2 pencil, and I have a white eraser on the top, and you want a really good sharpener, so we are always working with a sharp pencil. This is one, I'll put it down the supply list, but it's actually you use both of those sharpeners to get it really, really, really sharp. So basically when I start, I have been working through the devotional, and this is the topic for this particular day. He came just as he said he would. And then the study went on through, and it began having us look in the Old Testament and in the New Testament, something that was prophesied or told about in the Old Testament, and then in the New Testament, the verses that showed how that was fulfilled in the birth of Jesus. Very, very, very cool. And in my head, my mental visual that came from that was this scroll that started in the Old Testament and then would go over to the New Testament. And I found a little reference photo online, and I highly recommend that. I am not an artist that just can sit down and draw things out of my head. I love working on things that I can look at as a reference. So I found a reference and had it ready on my phone for me to look at. I usually start with my titling or making sure that I know where my words are going to be when I am working in my journaling Bible. And for those of you that haven't been following me mostly on Facebook or Instagram, you may not have seen some of this. I have a great blog post that kind of explains why I'm doing some Bible journaling. I've really come to love it. And I can share a little bit more with you there, but I wanted you to see this process. So I'm going to begin by watercoloring, and I found that because these Bible pages are particularly thin, I need to work with as little water as possible. And before I start painting, I want to show you the back side of a page that I've already done watercolor on. So the number one question I get asked is, does it bleed through? And you can see there's a little bit of crinkling, but by doing small amounts of layers and drying it, it does not bleed through to the other side. By creating 2 or 3 little color variations there in the tray, and the watercolor is going to be kind of that base layer, and I put it down and I dry it, and yes, the paper does get a little crinkly, but when it's totally dry and I close it, the weight of the book flattens it out pretty well. So I know that it might seem a little little scary to be painting on something and having the paper crinkle right before your eyes, but trust me, we'll work it out. I am just putting in basic colors here. I'm going to do much more of the detail work with the colored pencils. You notice I'm stopping and drawing in between. You can layer this paint without it seeping through or bleeding through to the other side, but you've got to be patient with it. So now I'm adding a little detail. You notice there in my reference there was this little hole that was a torn or a tear in the scroll, and so I added that. And I love those little visual details that I probably, if I was just trying to figure out how to draw a scroll, I probably would have had a hard time, or just wouldn't even have thought of that. So I love having those reference photos. Now I'm adding a little shading, but it still pretty much just looks like some stripes of gold on the paper. I know, but we're gonna get there. Just hang with me. But I found that I get better color if I do kind of this first layer in watercolor. It kind of gives the foundation for everything else. Then when I move to my Prismacolor pencils, things can begin to be defined, and there's a richness that comes by adding those colors in. So you can see I'm selecting some of my yellow ranges, kind of a bit of orange, some browns, and some warm grays to work with. I'm also going to pull out a couple of one deep purple and one lighter one to use for shading. These white sticks are called blending stumps, and they are what you use to apply the Gamsol or your odorless mineral spirits when you are wanting to blend your colors together on something that you've colored with your colored pencils. Colored pencils are a wax-based pigment delivery kind of thing, and because they're wax-based, if you apply this odorless mineral spirits to it, it melts that wax and causes the colors to blend together, like I'm showing you here. Night and day difference, and it gives you a real rich look. So adding colored pencils over our watercolor will give us a lot more depth. It begins to look more real than we can actually accomplish with just watercolors. And for me, there's a little more control with it because watercolors kind of go where they want to go. I can get to the detail with this. So what you're seeing is I'm going to lay down just a little bit of color at a time. You can erase your colored pencils before you've applied Gamsol to them. But once you have applied the Gamsol, they're kind of permanent. They're very sheer. You can see that you can still read through the coloring that I've done. But what I suggest that you do, even if you are not new to working with colored pencils, the paper that we're working on in our Bibles is a little bit different than anything that we've colored on in the past. So I have found the very best method is to just do a little bit at a time. Add a little color, do a little blending. Add a little more color, do a little more blending. And you'll get better results. So I'm back working on this particular little hole in the scroll, and what I found makes it look really real is if there's kind of even a cast shadow down in that hole. So I used a lighter gray, and then I came back in with some dark black over on the edge where there is the darkest part of it. But the key to it is to have a little highlight on the edge of the paper. And I'm going to use that throughout working on this scroll. Contrast is really your friend when you're working on a project like this, because it's the contrast that gives the viewer's eyes information about what they're looking at and causes it to look real or it's real. We say it's real. We say I'm coming in and I'm adding some darks in there. And if you follow me on YouTube, you know that I'm always kind of pounding the table saying, if it isn't looking like what you want it to, it's probably the contrast. Because it's the thing that I always stop short of. I forget how important that contrast is. I tend to blend and blend and blend and blend. And what I end up with is I get everything kind of in those mid-tones, not the real lights or the real darks. And it's those lights and darks that actually help us define the shape of things, where the edges are, those kinds of things. So if it's not looking exactly how you want it, it could be that you need to go add some lights or some darks. And I know that's scary, trust me. It's probably never even more scary than it was when I first started doing a little bit of work in my Bible, because I wanted it to be super right and super perfect. And I'm going to do another video on all of that. I'm trying to cover too many things on this particular one. I'm really wanting to show you these 3 techniques that I'm using. Okay, so now I'm going to go in and add some shadow. And I start with kind of a mid-gray. Shadows are always the deepest right by the edge of the object that is casting the shadow. But I'm going to blend in that medium, and then I'm going to go in with this really dark purple. And you'll see that I'm just putting a line of it. I'm not blending, I'm not coloring out away from that at all. I'm going to pull a little bit of that color out with the blending stump, but I'm leaving it the darkest right there by where the scroll is touching the ground. I'm even going back in here, and just on the rolled part, I'm adding a little bit of black so that you can clearly see where that edge is. Okay, guys, I'm going to tell you, I am not the letterist. I am not a great lettering expert. I am studying and I'm practicing, but I'm not going to let that stop me from doing things in here. So I practice. Sometimes they don't turn out exactly how I want, but you know what? I'm practicing. So here's how I'm going to try to tie these 2 pages together. I haven't shown you the other one. I'm working on the page that is in Isaiah right now. But my thought is that the scroll started in Isaiah and is going to go over to Luke. So I have taken the Hebrew word for Luke and written it in Hebrew on the scroll, kind of telling the person that where we are headed is to Luke. And Luke in Hebrew is the word and it means light. So I put what do you call it? The translation. I put the translation of the Hebrew word Luke below it, just as kind of a reminder. Now I'm showing you putting these pan pastels on here. They are great for a background, and they're very sheer and they blend really well together. I will tell you that when I was done, I probably, if I were to do it again, I probably would not have used the purple pan pastel. It's not my favorite, but it's not the worst either. And you know what? It's done. I'm going to leave it there. I even sealed it so that it wouldn't mess my page up. But just, you know, not everything always, you learn something when you try it. So the purple was not my favorite. I'm going back in with a Uniball pen, gel pen, and adding a little white highlight. You notice if it didn't work really well, I rolled it on my finger first. The heat does that. So now you can see I finished this page, and I've also done the companion scroll over in the Luke passage, and have used the word for Isaiah, which means Yah is salvation. Yahweh is salvation. I love those 2 together. And you can kind of see in this picture, I blended the left and the right page together so you can kind of see what that was. Took the middle of the Bible out just to kind of put those together for you. If you're interested in participating in the Journaling Bible community, it's a closed group. It just requires an invitation. I'd love to invite you to come be with me. If you follow me on Facebook, just send me a note and I will get an invitation to you. For those of you that are from the Bible journaling community, I appreciate you jumping over here and hanging out with me for this. If you would like, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel here by clicking the subscribe button below, and you'll be the first to know when I have new videos out. Thank you, all of you, for coming and hanging out with me. As always, follow me on Instagram, Pinterest, Facebook, and Twitter. And I'll be back with another tutorial really soon. I'd like to wish all of you a Merry Christmas and a happy Advent season. And be sure to take some time for creative play. I'll see you soon.